Welcome to Exception Handlers, the podcast where CTOs debug the challenges that keep us up at night. I'm Alex.
And I'm Bill, and we're here to deep dive into the runtime errors facing technology leaders today. Those real-world problems that only surface when our systems meet the complexity of actual operations.
This podcast is brought to you by the LA CTO Forum, a professional organization of technology executives in Southern California and beyond. So, given that this is the last episode of the year, we wanted to do that old podcast cliche of doing the big recap episode. And as far as that goes, there is no question that 2025 is the year that agentic AI development fully entered the mainstream. We, on this podcast, dedicated a lot of airtime to various aspects of the topic, and today we want to zoom out a bit and take a larger look at the implications of this for our industry. And so we kind of want to do this in a few topics, and the first topic is, and I think few people will argue this point, but just to make it, because of agentic AI, the cost of building software is going down significantly because one, AI can write a lot of code, and two, a single engineer can use AI to work on multiple things at the same time. There's all kinds of sort of body of evidence that's growing that developers can get, people say anywhere from 20 to 50% increase in productivity. Personally, for me, it seems like the best engineers can essentially double their productivity with these tools. And so that's a really impactful thing, potentially. What's your thoughts on this, Bill?
I agree. I think that, on the plus side, you can really see that there's a ton of potential. And I also agree that engineers such as yourself, who is a senior engineer, who understands the principles of proper software architecture and development and deployment, can really take advantage of this. Where I'm also seeing things that I'm not so excited about, and that is those people who don't have a skill set that is anywhere near what you and I have, and they're in a position of thinking that they can write software because they can describe what it is they're looking at or they want to see.
So I think that so the big but to this claim, right? So to your point, AI slop. If you don't know what you're doing, you can produce a lot of crap that maybe even has the appearance of fully functional software, but isn't really it, at least not in the long run.
Yes, and that's why I love when people use the metaphor of, well, it's like the introduction of the excavator. You don't need all these guys with shovels out there digging ditches anymore. And my answer is yes, but if you're digging in the wrong place, you can make a gigantic hole that creates a large problem.
That is very true. That is very true. And, it's really, and we'll get to this more later, but it's really interesting that, yes, you have to have some knowledge and expertise to guide the tooling properly. What to me is an open question is how much knowledge and expertise do you need to get going, and how much do you get through the process of using it? Because you could make the argument that you need just enough to get started, and as you use the tools and interact with the tools, your expertise will sort of naturally evolve. In fact, that's kind of the bet a lot of people are making on how the junior engineer position, which we've talked about before, is potentially going to evolve, is you're going to be sort of brought along by the tooling. It's going to give you insights and guidance into what good software is, and you're going to probably learn through painful mistakes. But, how much do you need to get started?
Right. Well, I think as we dive down into this a little bit more, we're going to come across a few concepts and ideas here that will open this up a little bit. And by that, I mean, is that, yeah, it's great that everyone's going to learn more and more as they use AI. And yes, the junior software engineers are going to be able to improve as they use it and deploy things. The question is, under what context are they deploying things? If the expectation is very high that a junior engineer or a single engineer is going to be able to get these things out into the world and operating, I think that there's an opportunity there for a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah. The other aspect of this, which is sort of the other but, I mentioned earlier that I think one of the reasons AI can make people more productive is because they can do more things at the same time. But there is a big question as to how high is that context switch if you're literally concurrently building multiple potentially unrelated features. At what point do you become the bottleneck? Meaning
Absolutely.
You simply cannot keep in your mind more than 2 or 3 things at the same time.
I think that's going to be a huge issue. Even when you're working on a large piece of software and it's a single piece of software, when you're going through the code at these kinds of velocities, it's not unheard of to not really pay attention to some of the underlying ramifications and details of what you've done. You're looking to make sure the code makes sense, it's operating properly, and it's testing for the tests that you're running right there in the unit capacity. But now, instead of going through tens to hundreds of lines of code a day, you're going through thousands of lines of code a day, and the implications are very large into what you have to try and retain mentally.
A friend of mine who's an engineer told me that before AI, he felt like his days were, peaks and valleys, right? You had intense moments of thinking followed by sort of less intense moments of thinking. Not that you weren't doing stuff, but you were kind of writing pedestrian software and your mind could rest for a second. You don't need to be fully engaged. And he goes, and now it's all peaks, no valleys. And so you are constantly engaged and constantly, or if you want to do a good job, you're constantly engaged, which means you burn out faster. Your days just cannot be as long as they used to be because there's no breaks.
Yes.
There's no waiting for compiling.
It's like watching a movie at 3x.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And you pick it up, yes, but if you lose your attention at any moment, you're going to miss a key element.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of to put a button on this whole topic, I like the quote that hopefully the aspiration is that AI is no longer helping humans write software. Humans are supervising AI that writes software. And that's a big, important shift, but that has all kinds of implications about how good the humans are, how much supervision the AI needs, and all the other guardrails that you need to make sure that this whole thing does not produce a bunch of AI slop that makes it even worse than it was without it.
Yes. And I would just add one other thing is the scope of the software endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the next topic. And here, I think there's sort of two parts to it. I want to actually start with the part where it's my thesis that given the impact AI is having on individual developer productivity, I think you can have what I call the one dev shop. I think you can reasonably say that a single developer now has enough because of AI to do everything they need to do to produce industrial strength software, not little game projects, but actual commercial software that you could be selling to people. And the reason I say this is because it's not that the systems are simpler, it's that the cognitive load of a human has been massively reduced because of all the stuff that AI kind of fills the gaps on. Especially expertise in areas you don't personally have tons of experience with. So that's my claim, that I think we are to a point now where one person, albeit a knowledgeable person, can be a one-man dev shop.
Many. They're pouring in so fast. I'm have to take a moment to process and line them up. While I agree that AI is moving in that direction, I think our current state, and I think it will be this way for a while, is that a small team will be able to meet that level of expectation. And by a small team, I mean you have a mix of expertise that ensures what the AI is doing is consistent with what it is you want to have accomplished. As we all know, there's many occasions where the AI will explain how it's done a fantastic job and covered all the bases and the testing is complete and the thing is secure and it will never blow up, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll have somebody who, say, is from DevOps will look at it and say, what about this? And it's clear that it's an issue. So in my perspective, I think the single person analogy is not going to be there for a while, but the small team analogy with mixed skill sets of people who are senior absolutely can be.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally hear that. But it's funny you bring up the DevOps example. From my personal sort of experience, I don't know DevOps. I mean, I understand the concepts. I roughly understand how AWS works, but I'm left to my own devices. I could never stand up a functional website, let's say, in AWS because it's not a simple thing. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of componentry. There's a lot of things you have to kind of get right. And there's no chance I could do that without Claude or something helping me out. But with it, I think I can, and I've tried and I've done it. And so of course, the question is, have I really?
Well, yes, you do think you've done it. I guess that my only response to that right now is I just saw a very interesting hack of a large and well-known organization who will remain nameless in this podcast, who was not paying attention to the security on their DNS naming, and somebody was able to basically create a subdomain within their DNS domain structure that they were able to use for all sorts of nefarious things. A DevOps person would have probably seen this within seconds. An engineer may not have been, a software engineer may not have been keyed up to be able to figure out what it was that the exposure was.
I think what you're getting to there is like, I bet you if someone asked the AI specifically about this issue, the AI probably would have caught it.
Yeah, sure.
But you don't know to
ask the question. Exactly. Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And that's true. And there is no question about that, right? Like you need to have some kind of bare minimum critical amount of expertise in a specific area for you to be able to use AI effectively. Otherwise, it's the blind leading the blind, or at least it's the blind leading the super smart, but completely oblivious, would never know to ask on their own.
The blind using the excavator.
Yeah. So that's, and I think to your point, that naturally constrains the number of people who could realistically pull this off, and makes it much more likely that the scalable thing is having that very small group of people as opposed to a single human being that all have complementary skill sets that can come together and actually produce something great. I think we both agree you don't need huge teams to do huge things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just a matter of
And the other thing that I just like to quickly point out is one of the traditional issues in small shop software has been, quote, the guy who knows everything about everything, and if the guy is not around or the guy quits, you have a large risk to the organization. I think AI does a great job of putting an end to the guy.
Yes, absolutely. And especially if the guy knows ancient frameworks or languages that nobody else knows immediately. Yes. Yeah. Somebody was just telling me the other day that they had inherited some really poorly functioning code in production. And when they started looking at it, they were like, I can't recognize what the language is. And then Claude took a look at it and said, oh, this is Pascal. And here's exactly what's going wrong, and here's exactly how you fix it. And then magically the issue was solved. I mean, that's
beautiful. I mean, that's the guy killer.
Exactly. You know, the other thing about this, before we move off of this topic, is there's a thing about, it's one thing to build software the first time. Yes. It's a whole other thing to maintain it. And if you're, one dude who's maintaining a bunch of software that you build, wow, what does that look like?
Yes. And again, it's not just experience within the market and experience within deploying, et cetera. It's experience within the application. Because at some point, if you're repetitively doing things, you're learning that, the customers want this, or the product needs this, or those kinds of things, or that didn't work in the past, as opposed to I'm going in, I'm changing the code and fixing it, which is one of the things that AI tends to do is it just takes things as at face value and operates on them based on the current requirements.
And see, this is where I'm hopeful that AI could be helpful here too, because I can imagine a situation where you get an email about some customer having some problem, and you aren't the first line of defense on that email. It's AI that reads the email, figures out what they're complaining about, goes, looks at the code, figures out what the code is doing about this, and then sends you a thing that says, you just got a customer support request. Here was the complaint. Here's what I found in the code. Here's my recommended approach to solving it. And if you click OK, I'll just respond to that person and say, thank you so much for reaching out to us. Here are my recommended next steps to fix it, or what have you. And maybe that solves a significant part of your issues, because oftentimes these support requests are still a person looking through a knowledge base, figuring out an answer and giving it to them, right? It's not necessarily, it doesn't require complex interaction or hand-holding.
And whether or not it's going through the code or it's going through the copious amounts of documents that you've been throwing off as you're building stuff,
right?
So that it gives all the hints and details and ideas and goal, whatever, philosophy of the application. I think the other thing though that brings up is in my opinion, a lot of the quote AI applications that we're going to see in the future are going to be those that provide frameworks for doing that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily just, oh, here's your personal assistant. It's here's a set of agents that we packaged together. Here's a set of tools that we built, with the design of you being able to support software.
Yeah. That is going to be a fascinating thing, right? The world of agents is rapidly evolving, and I don't think anybody has a very good idea of what's it all going to look like and what the orchestration layer is going to be and how is that.
Well, I think we all will agree what it's first going to look like is the Tribble episode on Star Trek.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, and I think it has to, right? I think you have to go through that process of it's a free for all. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. No one has any sense for how it's all supposed to actually operate because nobody knows what the end state should look like. And you get there through pain and iteration, which is normal. Like, I mean, this isn't the first time that's happened.
Absolutely, because it's that pain that's going to drive, the ability to create a solution for money.
Yeah, indeed. Which brings me to the last sort of claim that I want to make, and I think it is my hunch that given the lowering expense of creating software, I think it will become, if it hasn't already, economically viable to create kind of N of one software. So software for one client. And I say this because I think there is a latent demand for custom software. I can, imagine and have talked to actually small businesses who have customized workflows, customized particular needs, but could never dream about hiring a dev shop for 6 months at 50 grand or whatever, at the very least, to build them something that really meets their needs perfectly. It's just untenable. It's too expensive, and they could never pull the trigger. I think you could now get to a point where you could hire, whether it's one person or a tiny group of people, to build you sort of industrial strength software tailored to your needs, much cheaper and much faster.
I think we're heading in that direction. I don't quite share the level of optimism at the moment, but I think there's a potential for it. In my opinion, I believe to get there, what we'll end up, and kind of looping back to the agent discussion we just had, is it's going to be something of a Lego model. So you'll have built a bunch of agents that do a bunch of different things, and you'll cobble them together with maybe the customization being on the workflow, some other information that's unique to how the organization works. But instead of fully building something out, you'll be wiring things together which you've built.
Yeah, and that's been kind of the promise of a lot of frameworks over the years, right? The idea of whether it's the low code, no code solutions, or just sophisticated CMS frameworks that you could put together all kinds of stuff on top of. That's been the promise. And how well has that materialized? I don't know, because I think oftentimes those things are either too constricting or too expensive to really properly customize and maintain over the long run. So it's still not economically viable to do for a kind of a small individualized need.
Yeah, but where I think the difference is here is to your point of the ability of AI to quickly be able to build something custom. Being able to put together something that's scoped the size of an agent that does a very specific function lends itself really well to where we are now.
Yeah.
The complexity of a large business process is something where I start to get really wobbly in terms of letting the AI I'm going to replace Salesforce with something I just built. Not quite sure that that's what we want to do, but starting to chip away at the pieces, I think that's where it could really help.
My hunch is the sweet spot is going to be, if you think about a typical small business that has like NetSuite and probably not Salesforce, but some kind of a Shopify market or store or whatever. There's they use a bunch of systems, and if they could just have some automation integration with a little bit of a UX and a workflow on top of it, suddenly this one process that takes them forever and it sucks and it's painful becomes much more palatable. I think AI could be fantastic at that exact thing, because it's great at reading, protocols and APIs and figuring out how to connect to different systems.
For integration, yes, absolutely.
So and it's also pretty good at just figuring out a UX UI on top of something like this. So I think, yes, with proper guidance, I can imagine maybe that's where it starts, is that sweet spot of a small business who has just this particular set of needs that if they could just tie together a few things with a little bit of workflow and UI, they can get some value out of it, and it shouldn't cost them too much, and it shouldn't take forever to implement, and they want to just get it and use it. I think there's demand for it, but who knows?
Well, and we may see the resurgence of the small, consulting group, right? People coming out there and they're just doing custom stuff. There's a million agents. You don't know how to use them because it's not your business. I do. Let me stitch them together. The agents themselves are being supported by other people, and your job is to make sure that you have access and the workflows are tailored for the consumer.
I think related to this, it's also my hunch that most people don't know what they don't know, meaning like they wouldn't even know to think, oh, I can use AI to solve this problem. Meaning, so I'm talking about using AI not to build software, but to power software, right? So there's probably a ton of things where like, if I could just I get these emails that have these attachments and I need to do something with those attachments, and it wouldn't even occur to me to say I could take this thing, send it to an LLM, read whatever the hell is on that PDF automatically out, update this other system, and suddenly have most of it automated. Most people probably aren't aware of the fact that you could just do this very cheaply and quickly using a lot of these modern tools. And so I think that's the other opportunity for somebody who knows how to deploy AI against the business problem, not necessarily use AI to write code. That's also a place where you
absolutely. And again, I think that plays back into the concept of a resurgence in small consulting type groups. The 2 to 3 shop person who are out there and they're just keeping very small businesses who are reticent to get involved in AI, don't know what they can take advantage of, and are shown.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there is actually consensus here that if there's any opportunity, it's probably something like that to start with.
I think so. And where we are today, well, 2 years from now, who knows?
Who knows? So, if you kind of step back and take all of these different forces and put them together, it seems like agentic AI is changing the economics of software development, and that is making it potentially viable to have both N of 1 software produced by an N of 1 or a one dev shop, although that last one we may not fully agree on. But generally, team of tiny. But generally, that's kind of if the new economics of code, right? That's what it actually is. Because AI is making it so much cheaper and faster to build and maintain software. Those are the potential implications of how it could play out in the world and impact our industry, right? And so a lot of people who professionally are involved in software writing, suddenly could find themselves being that one-man shop or doing these kinds of things because it's now economically viable to do so.
Yes, and I think that level of change in the market is coming also because of the number of people who are no longer working in traditional software development roles.
Meaning there is, just like there potentially is demand for this, there's also on the supply side quite a few people who could be doing this that aren't already. Yeah. It's a really interesting world we're living in because it's so different from these. It's in some ways it's kind of back to the future because this is kind of how software started. Decades ago, it was like small teams solving small, simple problems for people because problems were simpler. The systems were simpler. You didn't have to worry about a bajillion things. We really went away from that. And it feels like with AI, we're potentially going back all the way to the beginning.
Or at least making it a viable option once again for a lot of people.
Yes. And on that note, we will wrap up today's conversation. So this is our last episode of the year, as I already mentioned. We're going to definitely start up next year with hopefully new interesting topics and new cool guests. But until then, if you found this topic or any topics interesting, the LA CTO Forum has lots of opportunities to engage with other CTOs about topics just like this one. If you're interested in learning more, find us on LinkedIn or on the web at lactoforum.org. Until next time, may your deployments be smooth and your tech debt manageable.
And remember, if you can't handle the exception, at least log it properly. We'll catch you next time.